news. Anthony had been in the RAF for just 5 months, as he joined on his 18th birthday in mid-June. By then, the true cost of lives lost in Dunkirk was common knowledge, and most people knew that just a small stretch of water separated the UK from German armies, and for the first time in many years, the British faced the possibility of invasion and subsequent defeat. Anthony had been desperate to join up. Knowing the fight to protect Britain would come from the air, he'd soon tired of the Home Guard which he'd joined when war was declared, and where he'd trained with broomsticks, with just a black armband to show he was in any official capacity at all. Jenny remembered it so well, the day he got his wish. He'd stood before her in Air Force blue, his hat at a jaunty angle, and the light of excitement dancing in his eyes. And though Jenny was bursting with pride, her stomach had contracted in fear for his safety. For just a few short weeks, all the time the RAF could spare to train their fighter pilots, Anthony was stationed with the 605 Squadron in Castle Bromwich, not so far away. Meanwhile, the Battle of Britain had raged in the skies. Jenny read all the news reports. The papers used the number of enemy planes lost in comparison to the British as if it were a score at rugby. 19-4 or 15-7, they'd claim. She doubted the accuracy of the British losses and presumed it was done to boost morale, which she found distasteful. War was no game, and every pilot lost belonged to someone. And far, far too soon, Anthony had become a part of it, stationed in an unspecified airfield in the south. Now Jenny began to pray in earnest for her youngest brother, for while she worried and prayed about the rest of her family, she knew that her younger brother in particular faced mortal danger on a daily basis. However, by the end of September, the Battle of Britain was over. The Allies were victorious, and Britain safe once more from invasion. Anthony had been home on leave for a few days. Now, just 2 short months later, he was dead. Jenny let out a long, shuddering groan. She got to her feet, shivering, and went into the living room, where her mother seemed awash with tears. Eileen Gillespie held her daughter pressed to her breast. Jenny would have welcomed comforting arms around her, but she knew that would never happen. Anyway, there were practical things to do, and she seemed the only one able to deal with them. She first had to phone the Dunlop, where she worked as a typist, and then see her sister Geraldine and her sister-in-law Jan, the wife of her eldest brother Seamus, to tell them the tragic news. She didn't want to see the priest. She felt God had let her down. But her grandmother said Nora needed him to visit, and so she made herself go that afternoon. Geraldine and her small son Jamie were installed in the house by then, for Geraldine said she was worried how the news of Anthony's death would affect Mother with her delicate state of health. As Jenny went down to Holly Lane to the priest's house, she wondered for the 1000th time why the whole family went on with the pretense that her mother was some sort of invalid. Nora O'Leary was nothing of the sort, and if she knew, so must they. But Jenny had only ever spoken about it with Anthony. For years it had been the same, and Nora had kept her husband Dermot dancing attendance on her because of it. When he'd breathed his last in the spring of 1939, Jenny had known with fearful trepidation that she, as the only unmarried daughter, would be expected to take over from her father. The prospect filled her with dread, for she knew her mother didn't like her that much. And to be truthful, she wasn't that keen on her mother either. She had hoped the war might postpone the grim prospect she saw before her, but when she suggested giving up her job and joining the WAFs, the family were loud in their condemnation. Only Anthony told her to go for it. More than once, he and Jenny had glimpsed their mother through the window walking around with no apparent stiffness and without her sticks, and yet, when they entered the house later, they would see her sitting in her chair, covered with a blanket, complaining of the agony she was in. Nora O'Leary was a fraud.